It's time, I think.
Yes, I think you stop. Pankaj, unmute yourself. Pankaj, unmute.
Yeah. Good morning, viewers. I, Dr. Pankaj Kumar from IUAC New Delhi, along with my INYAS colleague, Dr. Mahesh from IIT Jodhpur, welcomes you in 10th webinar of INSA-INYAS webinar series, Vigyan Setu. Friends, translational science is highly required in today's difficult time, where research discoveries from laboratories move to healthcare practices, that is, from bench to bedside. COVID-19 has made us realize the relevance of translational science even in a more serious manner. The ecosystem for doing translational research should be innovative for developing new approaches, technologies, and models as per the requirement of society. Friends, COVID-19 has changed the perspective of science and scientists for the human race who are looking up to science for solutions to end the rampage of novel coronavirus across the world. In the context of COVID-19 and in general, the requirement of innovative ecosystem for translational research. It is our extreme pleasure to have with us Padam Bhushan Padam Shri, India's first female brewmaster, Ms. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Executive Chairperson Biocon Limited, as our speaker. She will talk upon creating and enabling innovation ecosystem for translational science. I request all the viewers to post their questions related to the topic on YouTube chat, which we will be taking up with the speaker after the talk. Before we start the webinar today, it is our pleasure to have Professor Chandrima Saha, President INSA. I request Professor Saha to introduce today's speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning and welcome. It is an honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who is an iconic figure in India and who really needs no introduction. I do have to give a formal introduction, but before I do, I would like to say a few words about this webinar series. We, INSA and INYAS, started this series when lockdown ensued due to COVID-19. The idea was to inform the students, the teachers, and the public about issues revolving around the disease. I'm happy to see a healthy participation in these webinars and hope that these were useful. Although we have now a substantial knowledge about SARS-CoV-2, we also realize that many aspects of the disease remains unknown and much work needs to be done. As we go along, we have to find ways to apply the knowledge that we acquire for societal benefit. Eventually, the utility of science is in its contribution to betterment of the society. In that context, today's webinar on creating and enabling innovation ecosystem for translational science is a fitting topic. Now for the formal introduction to Dr. Shaw. You know, the dream of young scientists, many of whom are listening now, is to be successful scientists, entrepreneurs, or as teachers. I see Dr. Kiran Shaw, as the founder and executive chairperson of Biocon Limited, as an inspiration and a role model to follow for millions of aspiring young scientists. He treaded an uncharted territory of biotechnology in 1978, when the word has not become fashionable in India. This is a lesson for the young minds to do something different and dare to do it. Her journey from brewing to biotechnology has crossed many milestones, where she has been named one among the 100 most influential people in the world by the Times magazine. Conferring of the Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan by the Government of India were recognitions for her services to the nation. She has recently been named the EY World Entrepreneur of the Year 2020, which is a testimony for the recognition of her entrepreneurial journey of over 4 decades. One should appreciate the challenge, the skepticism, the criticism one faces during a remarkable journey like this. And yet, she stood firm, and the accolades that came her way was an appreciation of her grit and passion. We are really fortunate to have her with us today. You can also make a difference when you participate in decision making. While Dr. Shaw built up Biocon with her vision, she is now elected as a full-term board member of the trustees of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a member of the prestigious USA-based National Academy of Engineering. What we need in the country is the development of human capital for growing biotech industry. Dr. Shaw has, through her academy, a premier center for excellence for advanced learning and applied biosciences, is generating a quality talent pool, which is a great service to the nation. Amongst many of her activities for the society, Dr. Shaw has signed the Giving Pledge and initiation of the Gates Foundation to give majority of her wealth to philanthropic causes. So Dr. Shaw's contributions are many, and we welcome her to present her views on innovation and translation today at our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandrima. That was a very generous and kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank Pankaj for his introduction and for inviting me to this webinar. And, you know, I actually use this webinar as an opportunity to, again, put the spotlight on the importance of translational science and innovation. Because this particular pandemic has actually told us that it is science combined with clinical experience which will create the translational bed-to-bed, the bed-to-bedside, model that we keep talking about, but have not done much with it. Because this pandemic has shown us that it is so important to convert observations into new therapies, and it must be done very, very rapidly. And to me, this is an opportunity for all of us to focus on clinical research and translational science like never before. As you very rightly said, COVID-19 has actually challenged us in a way that we never knew before. We've known viruses and we've known about viral infections, but this particular viral infection has actually posed a large number of challenges about how we deal with infectious viral diseases. This has actually made us ponder about the the virus itself, the immune response it elicits, and about how do we detect the presence of this virus? How do we understand vaccine development in combating this virus? And how do we develop diagnostics that tell us a lot more about this virus and how it replicates in our bodies and how it creates the various manifestations and the harm that it causes in terms of its disease manifestation. In addition to that, I think we must also remember that there are many, many things that have happened in terms of understanding this virus and learning to innovate based on this virus. For instance, today we know that data analytics is also playing a very crucial role in us understanding this virus better. We all know that one of the serious complications of COVID-19 has been the impact on the lungs and on creating this very, very intense ARDS. And one of the very big observations which has actually led to innovation is simply the understanding of X-rays and CT scans, and using AI to really understand the patterns of these lungs, and making sure that we actually understand the extent of the damage that the virus has caused. This itself is allowing us to understand the importance and the effect of what we call as cytokine storm. Things have actually come out from this virus. I must share with you that our own company repurposed one of its drugs because we realized that the cytokine storm was being elicited by this virus, and it was actually creating a huge number of cytokines, which were then basically creating a very large autoimmune kind of an response from the body. And we repurposed one of our drugs, which was actually used for calming down the immune response to such kind of interventions. And we actually found that it actually has a very, very good impact on calming down the cytokine storm and rescuing patients who were actually beginning to become very seriously affected by this cytokine storm. So I think this is a disease that has taught us the importance of translational science. And I, for one, believe that COVID-19 has to be a pandemic that is managed by science with the combination of clinical experience, rather than just looking at it in a trial and error method, which is what we seem to have been doing all this time. For instance, let's start with diagnosis. We know now that the biggest danger we face today is the spread of the virus. And we know that if you actually use science and track how the virus grows in your system, we know that in the first 3 days is where the virus starts replicating. And that is the phase where you are generally asymptomatic, but you can be a very high carrier of the virus and spread it. How do we then, track down these first 3 days of asymptomatic viral spreaders or viral carriers? That then gets down to the diagnostics. We know that RT-PCR is the most accurate diagnostic, but we also know that it takes time, very often more than 3 days, to get those readouts from the various labs. In the meantime, you also have antigen tests. These antigen tests also have got a large number of false positives and false negatives. Then you have got what are called as the LAMP tests, which are slightly less accurate than RT-PCR, but far more reliable than the point of care antigen tests. Then how do you use all these tests? How do you then use antibody tests? These are questions that we have to answer through science-led kind of rationales. And this is where translational research comes in, and where a number of tests can be developed based on the needs, based on the way you use them, and based on the way you interpret these tests. So I think this is a big opportunity for translational research and translational scientists. Then comes the treatment itself. When do you use what intervention? I think we need to use a standard of continuum of care, where you know when to use an antiviral, when do you use plasma therapy, when do you use immunomodulators, when do you use steroids. All this actually can come about from translational science, because it is the combination of all these scientific understandings and interventions that will allow you to come up with very innovative processes, ideas, therapies, etc. I think there's vast amounts of data that are being generated just from this pandemic. And these are very disparate data points, whether it is the testing data, whether it is the clinical data, whether it is the surveillance data, etc., etc., etc. How do we then make sense of this all? How do we use all this data to actually give us predictive signals of how to manage the disease? And I think this is possible. We need to create a data lake. We need to create a lot of the data that we're getting, even from contact tracing, even from the highly dense clusters and how that the virus could spread. All this actually should be used in a very, very intelligent way. And I know that there are a number of efforts that are being actually put to good use in many parts of our country and the world to see how we basically utilize these data sets in a data lake to give us far greater information about the way the virus needs to be managed. Now, this, therefore, I again go back to the fact that it is about science. We need to manage COVID through better scientific understanding. This is not a disease that can be done with trial and error. This is not about opinions and views and what has worked here anecdotally or what has worked anecdotally somewhere else. I think this has to be led by deep understanding of the science of the virus. And I think we're beginning to understand the virus much better. And let's even understand that when we look at the vaccine development, again, it's translational science that will help us to develop the best vaccine. Today, we have a number of vaccine candidates. All of them are basically trying to develop a vaccine that will elicit antibody response and T cell response. Now, we know that when we look at what all the early data of the vaccines is showing us, we are seeing that some vaccines elicit a very strong antibody response, but a very weak T cell response. In many others, we are seeing a medium response to both antibodies and T cells. And we have to make sense of all this. The most important data set which is still missing is the durability of response. Because we've also seen in this pandemic that convalescent patients who have actually expressed a very good level of neutralizing antibodies while they were recovering from the disease have also shown that a few months later, there is no signs of the neutralizing antibodies. So we still don't know whether there are memory antibodies, and we also need to understand whether there is memory T cells, which will again kick back when the virus tries to infect again. These are the kind of answers. And we also need to understand the coronavirus itself. I think for too long, we have basically not done enough basic research on viruses. We have not done enough translational research on how viruses actually act and impact the human body. And we need a lot more to actually focus on, which this virus has taught us. For instance, I think it is important for us to have a viral repository. It is important for us to track mutations of this virus and many other viruses. It is important for us to understand how important it is to develop vaccines that take care a lot of all these mutations. And we also need to make sure that we spend a lot more time and effort on understanding the science of viral immunology. I think we haven't done enough of that. We have a large number of scientific institutions. We have the scientific capability, but we need the scientific temper. This is where I think the combination of diagnostic sciences, regulatory sciences, viral sciences, and of course the translational sciences that combine all of this will actually create a very innovative ecosystem. And I, for one, believe that this is a crisis which we must not waste, because we have so many opportunities to, rekindle that scientific temper in our country. This is an opportunity for us to really make sure that the scientists of our country really get energized and really incentivized to really focus on great science ahead. I also want to basically also talk about the fact that we must look at policies for science. We must make sure that science is invested in a serious manner. I think we have always basically underinvested in R&D, science, and innovation, hoping that it will somehow, have a life of its own. But I think it's time that we looked at the importance of investing in science and technology and innovation, because I, for one, believe that non-linear economic growth will only happen when you invest in science, R&D, and innovation. That is what actually spearheads very high value economic development, which will also create the kind of high value skills that we can generate in this country, and which can make us a very, very leading science and innovation led economy. As you know, we are very blessed with the kind of science and scientists. We are also blessed with the fact that we have a very high knowledge industry, which has been spearheaded both by life sciences and information technology. And this is the combination that we need to bring together to really lead the economy into the future. Now, let's look at what are some of the things that we really need to focus on. One is, I also want to focus on the importance of women in science. I think women have been a very important part of the scientific ecosystem, but I think we have to really put the spotlight on the opportunities that women have in leading science for the country. As we know, the THSTI has been led all this time by a very, very commendable woman scientist, a woman scientist leader, Gagandeep Kaur, who also was the first woman to be elected into the Royal Society. Now, I think this is an institute that has a huge role to play. They have played a very big role in COVID. And, we have come up with a large number of COVID diagnostic strategies. We are coming up with a lot of information on vaccine development, on virology, etc., etc. But I think we are also we are at an inflection point where the National Digital Health Mission has also been announced. Now, here, I think we need to really focus on the starting point, which is electronic medical records. How do we capture clinical data and then use that clinical data for translational research and translational outcome? And I think this is where we as a country, we as a scientific community, we as medical practitioners must combine forces to really make it into a very powerful platform to innovate new therapies, new diagnostics, new vaccines, etc., etc. So I really would like to use this webinar to spread that message to scientists, to researchers, and to the government policymakers. Because I really believe that this is a unique opportunity. And this is an opportunity every country has. But India is in a unique position to make it into a very big opportunity for the country because of the scientists that we have, because of the scientific institutions that we have, because of the investments we've made in science and technology up to date, and also because of the kind of industries that we have created, which are very innovation led. So I think with that, I would like to basically stop and say that this is also a very big opportunity for startups, for small and medium enterprises, and for scientists to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. Because I'm very convinced that the best of scientific ideas are born out of laboratories in academic institutions, and the best of scientific ideas can be translated into economic opportunities that will actually build a very strong biotech sector for this country. So I'll stop there, Pankaj, and I'd love to take questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for setting the tone and conveying the background message. Yeah. So now we will take the questions. Mahesh?
Yeah. Thank you very much for wonderful talk. And now I request viewers to this one. They can ask their questions in the YouTube channel chat box here. So now the
Bandwidth is a little
is
low, Mahesh.
there. I
You
am
want to switch off
from the
your.
academia, and
Mahesh,
most of the viewers
Mahesh,
also from
Mahesh, Mahesh, switch off your camera. Switch off your camera and speak. Then you.
academia. So
you're not,
in academia, this
We can't hear you.
on we give
I think there is some internet
hello.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is it clear? Okay.
No.
Mahesh,
Hello.
Yeah.
Pankaj wants to switch on. He's switched off his. Okay.
Yeah, I will take the questions. Sure. Sorry, sorry for the interruption. Okay, so the question is, ma'am, that often in the name of translational science, academic researchers get funded and they keep working for years, and most such research leads into outcomes meant for publication or at the maximum filing a patent. Many either don't know or fail to avail industry partnership. Do you think that as soon as a project is proposed with a translational objective, that an industry partner could be linked to it even by the funding agency? This will ensure that if some success is achieved at lab scale, it can be translated quickly.
That's a very good question. I think we must understand that there are two types of translational research. One is which can be really pursued by the clinical researchers in hospital settings. These are very, very important translational research opportunities because these are clinicians who make observations which can actually be translated into new ideas, new innovation. And that must be encouraged. What we don't do in our hospitals is we get the clinicians to focus on clinical practice. We are not giving them time to focus on clinical research. So one of my requests to every hospital in the country is please provide a certain dedicated time for clinicians to focus on clinical research. Because when you make clinical observations which could lead to clinical translation into new innovation, I think those are the kind of new ideas that industry is now taking forward. You see there are many examples of this in many, many parts of the world. You look at what COVID itself has thrown up. You've seen many, many Lancet papers coming out of clinical research observations that are now saying this is what we ought to do. That is what we ought to do. So that is coming out of the temper that the clinical research temper that you see in many parts of this world, in many parts of the world, especially the US, UK, and some of the European countries. I think this is what we need to encourage in our hospitals. So that's the first thing. The second kind of research, which you very rightly said, if there is a translational research proposal, I think having an industry look at that particular proposal to see whether it is of interest is very, very useful. But it is not a must. Because I really believe if there's a researcher who comes up with a great idea, I agree with you, it should not be forever. It will lead to publication, which is very important. It may lead to IP, which is also very important. So I think once you get that IP and publication focus, that also garners a lot of interest from the private sector. So I don't think it's a must to have an industry partner. It's a nice to have. But I think more than anything else, we must encourage people to pursue an idea and take it to fruition through translation.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the next question is that, do you think publication first versus patent first concept should be changed? Should not these be independent of each other?
See, I just want to give you some perspective, okay? India, if you look at it, if you look at the Indian pharmaceutical sector, we are the largest vaccine producer in the world. We are the largest makers of generic medicines in the world. But if you look at our share of the global pharmaceutical value chain, it is only 3%. And the reason it is 3% is because we are not creating high value in the global value chain. And for that reason alone, I believe that you must focus on patenting. You must create a culture where you are going to create new knowledge. And you must do that. You must patent that new knowledge, because that is what will create value. India must be in a position to create its own new vaccines. Why not? I mean, we have all that it takes to create a new vaccine. India must come out with its new diagnostics. India must come out with its own therapeutics. And we've done all of that in the time of COVID. We are coming out with our own vaccines. We are coming out with our own diagnostics. And we are coming out with new therapeutics of our own. Okay. So I think this tells you that this is a value creation opportunity for India. And there is nothing wrong in coming out with IP and patenting, because I think this concept that patenting actually destroys the affordability is completely wrong. I think patents allow you to create more value. It is up to you to decide what you want to charge for that product or that innovation. There is no mandate saying that if it is patented, you must charge more. It is up to innovators and innovator companies to decide how they want to go about access and affordability. Our own company is doing that. Just because we have patents and just because we have very unique products, we are not trying to price our products beyond the reach of people. We have a very different mission in life.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello.
I can't hear very clearly. Your volume is low, Pankaj.
Volume?
You hear me now? Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So a similar question. Is it possible that funding agencies could place all the approved projects open in front of Indian biopharmaceutical industries and let them pick one that they might want to take interest in? Then both the industry partner and the scientist could be officially coupled together.
Yes, I think there is this must be done. I mean, I think every research institutions needs to showcase its research. And we haven't done that very well, because that's where we've been too much of an ivory tower research culture, which needs to open up. I think every research institution must showcase its research. And today, in the day of the digital era, there's no reason why they can't do it. Why don't they put up all their research programs in a very inviting way, not just as a list of projects? The problem we have in our system is that they just list everything and nobody wants to really go through it. But if you actually put the spotlight on some very interesting research programs and showcase it and really invite people to look at the research, I'm sure there are a lot of hidden gems that people have not looked at.
Yeah. Thank you. Next is the extent of paperwork required often from research and development institutes is immense, and many times they lack a fast and streamlined system. Don't you think, unless this is changed to a less complicated and less time-consuming process, it will be a psychological barrier for an academician to even look for an industry partner?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more, because I think the process has to be simple. The process has to be streamlined. And I think this is a time when we should look at some of these reforms in the way we expect people to apply or even, look at any of these opportunities. So I completely agree. I think we must streamline and simplify all these kind of procedures and processes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next question is there because in academia we supervise the PhD student basically, and they are familiar with the academia environment, not with the industry. So is it possible to supervise jointly with industry and academia, PhD students mainly?
Absolutely. I think there has to be a very good intersection between industry and academia. And I think you must create forums in translational science where you can actually create programs where both private and industry and academia partnership is there. Um, and again, I go back to the point that whatever you're doing as a project or a program must be interesting enough and inviting enough for this partnership to happen.
Okay, thank you. In India, basically between academia and industry, we have a big gap compared to the Western world. So what are your views this one, how to reduce this gap?
So my first view is that scientists must think about entrepreneurship. And I think that it starts with that. Why do you say the Western world is better at this? Because in the Western world, they've encouraged scientists to think about how to apply their research for a entrepreneurial gain. Okay. And many of these scientists don't have to start companies, but they can be part of the company. So they are part of the founding team. And that's how a lot of these, the science is translated into an entrepreneurial opportunity. And that's what needs to happen even in our country. We have made it very cumbersome and difficult for a scientist to start a company or to even be part of a company. That has to change. Secondly, I think we must also understand that there's a good opportunity today for academic researchers to do a sabbatical in an industry, and for industrial scientists to do a sabbatical in an academic lab. Those are also very interesting concepts, which we must also experiment with. But more than anything else, I would like to see many more scientists, partaking in entrepreneurial activities. That's when you will really see science really flourishing. Because I've seen that happen in the US. In the US today, every one of the vaccines that you're talking about coming out of the US has come out of an academic research lab. Whether it's the Moderna vaccine, whether it is any of the other kind of vaccine programs, they've come out of academic laboratories.
Okay. So now we will take viewers' questions. First question is by Arup Kumar Ray Chaudhary. He is asking, please comment on the utilization of past data on similar virus.
See, we've had very little past data. We've had past data on coronaviruses like SARS and MERS. And we should actually be using a lot of that data. And a lot of that data has been used globally to develop vaccines, to understand how these viruses have worked. But this is a new virus. So what we need to do is to combine some of the old data, but then look at the new science and the new data and make sure that we understand this whole group of coronaviruses better.
Yeah, thank you very much. And next question is from Upasna Ray. And she is asking, a patient after discharge from hospital gets the case file for his record. Is it not possible for policymaker to allow scientists to use such case files to make case reports if the patient allows?
See, first and foremost, I think it should be allowed, but it should be anonymized. I think it's very easy to use technology to anonymize patient data. And unless we allow access to such data in an anonymized way, you will not be able to do justice to translational research. So I, for one, believe that every patient data that you get, and that is our biggest strength. Look at the disease burden we have in our country. Look at the numbers we have. If all that data could be actually anonymized and used for research purposes, I think it would be tremendously helpful for furthering translational research.
Correct. Yeah. Next question is by Dr. Ashok Tiwari. He says that we know immunity has important role in fighting off infections. How do we respond to the commercial advertisements by the various agencies of quick immunity boosters in such a pandemic situation?
Look, I think basically, if anyone wants to boost their immunity through exercise, through yoga, through any of these immune boosters, all that is welcome. I don't think you should not encourage such things. At the same time, we know that this disease is beyond that. It is a very serious kind of impact that it has on the immune system. So I think if any immune booster or any immune exercise and things like that can help you boost your immunity, it will help you to cope with the disease, hopefully, in a stronger way. So there's nothing wrong with encouraging all these things, but I think we should not expect it to protect us against the virus.
Yeah, ma'am. Next question is there because in the industry they are having many problems, and in academia we are not familiar about these problems. So is it possible industry can float few projects and then they can invite the proposals?
Look, I think we must not keep thinking that our own scientific ecosystem is not capable of great ideas and great innovation. I think that's the mistake we make. Right now, we think that everything comes from industry. Let me tell you, industry in India has actually been focusing on Me Too innovation. They need to look for new ideas, new innovation. That can only come from academic research that is looking at creating new knowledge. So let's not demean our researchers and our academic institutions. I think we must encourage them to think of new ideas and translate those new ideas. I think industry has to look at what's coming out of our labs. And let me tell you, unless we encourage that, you will never create a scientific temper. And to me, there are lots of good ideas. Look at what COVID has thrown up just in the area of diagnostics. Okay. Every one of our CSIR labs have come up with some really interesting technologies, some really interesting ideas, and industry wants to take it forward. Now, even some of the vaccine, I know many vaccine ideas have come out of many of our labs. Those are, of course, at this point, just early ideas, but we need to support them. We need to nurture them. And I think what is more important is for the monies that we are investing in our research institutions, that money needs to be well spent. Are we looking at cutting edge areas? See, I also find one of the problems in many of our research institutions is we constantly do Me Too research, which actually is not a good utilization of that money, right? We need to really challenge ourselves and say, what is it that I can do cutting edge? And many of our research labs are capable of doing that. I've seen a few of those programs in many research labs which are really cutting edge, but we need to invest more in those kind of programs rather than just spreading the funding equally in all the projects, where some of the mediocre projects also get the same as some of the cutting edge projects. Why can't we have an investment mechanism within our research laboratories where some of the cutting edge ideas, the cutting edge programs get more allocation of funds?
Correct. Yeah. So next is by Mahima Kausik. She says that she strongly feels that passion for research is decreasing in our younger generation because of various reasons. Everyone wants to work for things which gives quick gain in return. What is your comment?
My comment is science is exciting, and I think people must be excited to be in pursuit of new knowledge. And I feel that, yes, you're absolutely right. People want quick returns, but we've also seen that those quick returns have also got us into trouble. And you know that during this time of COVID, everyone who wanted quick returns suddenly finds themselves out of jobs. So I think we need to understand that pursuing science is a long process. It is a commitment, but it is also something that will give you a lot of, satisfaction, intellectual satisfaction, and it will reward you in a big way if you do something really path breaking.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So yeah,
eventually,
next question is there. Yeah, many scientists in the abroad, they are doing wonderful. They are working together with the industry. But whenever they are coming in India, their performance is not at the same level. So is there any problem with ecosystem, or what are your views on this?
Yeah, I think there is a problem. I think basically we have not created the right structure in our research institutes. We have not created the right leadership and autonomy that we need in our institutes. We've made them into over administered and regulated institutes, which we shouldn't. I think science has to be freed up. Science has to be made very exciting, and science has to be celebrated. See, that is what is important in our country. We have great scientists, but we don't talk about science. We don't celebrate science. For the first time, people are talking science. At least our newspapers are actually discussing science for the first time. uh, all this time, whenever there was an exciting scientific breakthrough, did any newspaper carry it? Did anyone even talk about it on social media? We are much more interested in talking about negative things and things which are really unscientific and which are not at all useful for this kind of a discussion. But today, for the first time, I'm seeing there is an interest to understand because it affects all of us. Everybody is scared. That's why they want to understand science. And this is the first time it has shown you the importance of science.
correct. So, ma'am, now the next question is about your own experience. Since you have worked in different, worked under different dispensation at the central government level, what is your comment in the age of doing business under all of them?
I have been very blessed because I have been asked by the government of Karnataka to chair the vision group on biotechnology. And this is a very unique model where it is a partnership between industry, academia, and the government. And we have been able to do some wonderful things. That's why we've been able to create centers of excellence in research. If you look at why is Bangalore called the research capital or the science capital of the country, it's because we've got some great scientific institutions. The National Center for Biological Sciences, the Indian Institute of Science, the Institute of Biotechnology and Bioinformatics and Applied Biotechnology, etc., etc., and Center for Human Genetics. These are all very, very high-end centers of excellence. And when you have high-end centers of excellence, there's always a connect with the industry. For instance, today, some of the most vibrant incubators are at IISC, at the IBAB, at NCBS. CCAMP was actually declared the best incubator in life sciences. Uh, IISC has a wonderful incubator coming up. This is where I'm saying, the scientists are now becoming entrepreneurs, and the scientists are actually linking up with industry needs. That's what will create the kind of ecosystem we are talking about.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Yeah, so when you have started Biocon, so what are the difficulties you have faced in initial stage?
So, when I started Biocon in 1978, I think Chandrima said that, it was at a time when nobody understood what is biotechnology. They couldn't even spell the word biotechnology. And I had a lot of credibility hurdles. Like, banks were saying, what is this business you're trying to start? I think it's very risky for us to lend you money. People didn't want to work because they said, what kind of a business is this? Will you give us job security? I was also a young girl at that time. I was only 25 years old. People wouldn't take me seriously. So it was a big challenge for me. But then I got a young group of scientists and engineers who got very excited with what I was doing. So over the next 10, 20 years, we built up a very credible business. So my journey has been about building credibility. And my journey continues to be about building credibility. So first I had to build credibility in India. Now I'm trying to build credibility in the world because Indian innovation is not well recognized globally. And I'm trying to actually make that, correct that perception. I feel that Indian innovation must be a globally recognized opportunity, even for a person like me. So my entrepreneurial journey ahead is about how do I make sure that people realize that we've got very credible innovative programs that can be path breaking, globally recognized. So that's what I'm on to now. And so every time it's about building credibility. I've learned how to build credibility in my own chosen path. Now I'm trying to build credibility. For instance, for the first, when I got into biopharmaceuticals, India had to build credibility that it can actually develop biologics and biosimilars for global acceptance. And I've done that. Today, we are the only company from India that has got US FDA and European approval for many of our biosimilars. And initially, there was a feeling from even the Western companies that, oh, you cannot possibly do this in India. But we've proven them wrong. Today, we have a very growing market share. I also wanted to prove that as an Indian company, we can play with the big insulin makers. We can actually be one of the big insulin makers ourselves. And today, we are the third largest insulin maker in the world. And those kind of things are about challenging yourself to build credibility. And that's what scientists in India also should be doing. Challenge them yourselves to be credible in the world.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
In fact,
Yeah.
your uh, your journey as an entrepreneur is really an inspiring, and not only inspiring for the general public, but especially it's inspiring for the female researchers. So, what is your message to the female researchers who are working in this field? How the challenges which they face at the family level or at the societal level, how they can overcome all these challenges and follow the path which you have already
See,
followed.
I've always believed that science is agnostic to gender. Okay, science is something that anybody can pursue, and I think you will see at a academic level there is always a huge representation of women in science. But as they climb up the ladder, they become fewer and fewer. And I think today we are seeing that actually that is reversing. Actually, because there are not too many takers for science in general, I think women are now realizing this is a big opportunity. In fact, today, if you look at many of our research institutions, there are really good women scientists leading the charge. Now, even if you look at space science, you've seen how many women scientists have actually entered those realms. Life sciences, a lot of women in life sciences. So, I, for one, believe that women actually have this huge opportunity. I think society accepts women in science much more than women engineers. But even that is changing because I think the IT space has opened it up for women. So I think today women should not feel that they have huge, detriments against them. I think women should realize that there are huge opportunities in science. And I really hope more and more women show leadership in science as well. I just want to add that in my own company, one of my driving objectives was that I wanted to make it a very attractive opportunity for women to pursue science and scientific careers. And today I'm very proud that in my R&D division, little over 40% are women scientists. And I have a very large R&D enterprise.
That is really, really good. Yeah. So now
Yeah,
we have
it's really great.
Mahesh, please.
Yeah. So now I request Professor Chandrima Saha to give her closing remarks.
Yes. First of all, let me thank Dr. Shaw for giving such a eloquent, the lecture, and then following up with the questions that people pose to you. There are many questions that need to be answered. I wanted to ask one small question, that as a healthcare visionary, which you are, how do you think we should strengthen our rural healthcare sector? Because the urban, you see, the urban healthcare is now, in a shaky mode. So that's a very important thing to do. So how do we do that?
So, Chandrima, you'll be interested to know that, as an entrepreneur, as a CSR kind of activity, we had taken on this whole pilot program of creating digital primary healthcare clinics in very rural parts of India, in Rajasthan, in Karnataka, in Northeast, and in a few other Orissa and places like that. And I can tell you that our experience is that you can actually make a huge difference to healthcare in rural India. But to do, governments have to run with that. See, you can run pilots, but you can't expect CSR to do everything for the government. There has to be an understanding and appreciation of the power of technology to bridge many of these deficits that we have in the country. I, for one, believe that primary healthcare is a very, very important starting point for this healthcare network in the country. We actually have thought about primary healthcare as a very important part of healthcare, but we've never invested in it, we have never developed it, and we've let it collapse. I think now is the time to make sure that rural healthcare has a very strong primary healthcare component, which then connects with the tertiary healthcare at a district level. Now, if you go to what Thailand has done, for its own healthcare. Why is Thailand such a strong country in terms of delivering good healthcare for its people? It's because it has actually focused on primary healthcare in rural Thailand. Okay, let me share with you a very interesting, piece of data point where Dr. Soumya Swaminathan of WHO was sharing with us that Thailand for 10 years decided not to invest in tertiary healthcare but in primary healthcare at a public healthcare level. And for 10 years, it built a very robust primary healthcare ecosystem. And that is what it has stood them in good stead even today with the COVID crisis. When you have a strong primary healthcare sector, you can actually deliver and track and trace the virus much better than trying to do it in a centralized fashion. You have to decentralize all these things. And primary healthcare actually allows you to decentralize.
Okay, so it's good news that you have taken up you can't do alone. Government has to pitch in, but these, the digital healthcare for the rural sector, it's really.
Yeah, we call it Ilaj clinics.
Ilaj clinics, okay.
E, on the word E.
Ilaj,
but Ilaj clinics. So it's a combination of a digital diagnostic lab with a computerized support for the doctor.
Okay.
And it's a very interesting model. It has worked extremely well everywhere we've done it.
Okay, very, very good news. Well, thank you very much for giving us your time. We know you are very busy, and we are thankful to you.
Thank you.
At the end, on behalf of INSA-INYAS colleagues and on my own behalf, I wish to thank Ms. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw for sparing her time from her extremely busy schedule to share your views openly in such a candid manner. We believe that our viewers, in particular young researchers, have found it very useful and must have addressed their concern on this very relevant topic. For the information of our viewers, we will meet again at the same platform on August 29 at 11 a.m. with another eminent speaker, Professor Chandrama Saha herself. She's President INSA. And we look forward to come back on August 29 at 11 a.m. You can follow this discussion and further updates on our official YouTube channel. Till then, take care and goodbye.